Back in 2015, my wife and I packed our bags and moved to South Carolina. We specifically landed in the Midlands region, Columbia, Lexington, and Lake Murray area. Since then, I've become a real estate agent. I've helped numerous people relocate here to South Carolina, specifically the Midlands, coming from truly all regions of the country, from Florida to California, from Hawaii to New Jersey, New York to Arizona, Pennsylvania to Texas, and everywhere in between. Whether they were escaping skyrocketing home prices, high taxes, blistering winter, hurricanes, politics, and so many more things, they found home here in the Midlands of South Carolina. As well, during that time, I've met with a lot of people that end up telling me either the Midlands of South Carolina or South Carolina at all was not for them. There were things they didn't realize that turned them off from the state and the Midlands. As well, I've unfortunately gotten phone calls from people that found my videos after they moved, and they said they now regretted their decision of moving here and wanted me to help them sell their house so they could get out as quick as they could, wishing they found my videos sooner so they knew the reality of those things. And that's why this video, I'm going to share with you those things. What are the reasons that people did not like South Carolina, or specifically the Midlands of South Carolina? Again, I've been here 8 years and we have no plans on leaving, and I've helped numerous clients that love it here. But I don't want you to be one of those that regret your decision. I've always said, I put these videos out every single week as a transplant myself to help inform you, not to try and convince you. And that's why these are the 6 reasons you may not survive here in the Midlands of South Carolina. And the last one, it truly may surprise you. Oh, and by the way, there's a bonus one at the end that I wouldn't say anyone said it's prevented them from moving here, but it fills up Facebook forums and comment sections on YouTube because it still takes a ton of people by surprise when they find out this one thing about South Carolina. The weather. All right, let's try this again. Weather and natural disasters. So obviously weather comes a lot down to perspective. I mean, I've literally had clients from Alaska to Hawaii, Florida to New York. So their perspectives about the weather are all different. Whether or not you think our winters are mild or our summers are too hot and humid will all depend on where you're coming from. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break this down to you statistically so you understand the numbers, and then I'll give my personal perspective to you. Coming from growing up in California, now there was a season or two I worked on a ski resort, so I've dealt with a little bit of snow in my life, but that's the perspective I'm coming from, as well as what my clients have told me, because some have been a little bit surprised. They said it wasn't what they expected, and especially when that came to the natural disasters. A lot of people were surprised by some of these things and freaked out, texted me all the time. So we'll get into that in just a little bit here, but let's talk about the weather in general. So the first one that I know people freak out about is humidity. Yes, it's a subtropical climate. We do see, thankfully, a mix of all 4 seasons though. Relatively mild on those, and we'll get into that. But let's start with summer, as humidity, heat is some of the biggest fears I hear. Like, can I deal with the heat and humidity? Now, again, perspective wise, I prefer the humidity over the dry heat we dealt with in the West. But again, my perspective, some people hate the humidity. But it does get hot and humid, especially statistically from June to August. Average we see is 89 high and a 70 low. This is one thing tricky during the summer. I feel like it just doesn't cool down some nights. You're like wanting to open the windows and it's like, nope, still too hot out there. But either way, from my personal perspective, summer is definitely hot and humid. Now, to me, the worst of it seems to be like late July and August. You get these thunderstorms that just roll through and they make that humidity just crank up to the next level where you're just sweating out there. I mean, I've seen steam rolling off the asphalt, and I know people that are like, I gotta shower like twice a day just because I walk outside and it's so stinking hot and sweaty. And I will give you a little tip here. I've learned this the hard way. Of course, you're like, hey, it's the weekend, let me sleep in, I'll do the yard work a little later. I have tried to do yard work at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon during the summer, and I thought I was gonna die. Like 15 minutes in, you're like pouring sweat and you're like, forget this, I'm done. Like, get up early, get it done before the sun comes up, or do it late in the afternoon, because trust me, like that humidity does just work you where you're like, I don't feel like I'm 18 anymore, I feel like I'm 100. But either way, from September to November is what we roll into fall. We see an average of about 67 high and a 43 low. Now, this is what I call one of the peak times for me, because from about mid-September September through late October, again, are those perfect days where it's nice during the day and you can sleep with the windows open at night. Now, December until February is where we see winter. Average of 58 high and a low of 38. Now, winter is kind of funny because you'll have one weekend where it's literally 70 degrees and thunderstorms, and 2 days later, there'll be a freeze warning. And this happens like during the day too. Like, it gets hard to get dressed in the morning because you'll wake up and you'll be like, oh, it's like 30 some degrees. Cool, let me put on a jacket and all this stuff. And by 11 o'clock, you're like stripping layers off. Like, oh my gosh, it's gotten so hot. And so over time, you get used to like, let me have an extra sweater in the car. Let me have a rain jacket because just in case it randomly rains today, you get kind of prepared for it, but it is different, at least for me, the weather extremes from one side to the other. But as you get closer to January, the cold to me at least stays more consistent. We see more days that freeze, and we even have days I can recall that it didn't even get above 30 degrees. It was just cold. And I'll talk about rain and snow in just a little bit here, but either way, spring comes in about an 83 high and a 61 low. Again, this is another one of those awesome times from about March through about May. You have those times again where it's like 70s, 80s during the day, and you can sleep with the windows open at night. We don't get like the winter where it freezes in the morning, gets hot in the after. Like, it's not as much of that. It's more this like peak time. People call it like California. I grew up in California, trust me, it's not like that all the time, but people call it California weather, where it's like 80s during the day and 60s at night, windows open, right? For you green thumb people, spring will trick you. It will come and you'll be like, yay, winter is over, but don't start planting yet. There's always one last freeze that sneaks in, and if you started planting, didn't cover it, it's gonna destroy it. You got them in too early. So if you think spring is here, just know there's probably one more freeze left. So hold off on planting until after that freeze. Now let's talk natural disasters, tornadoes. So first let's talk about stats and then my personal experience. So according to scemd.org, South Carolina has averaged about 11 tornadoes each year since 1950. And this is talking statewide, resulting in 47 fatalities and 1,057 injuries. And South Carolina itself ranks 26th in the United States in the number of tornado strikes and 18th in the number of tornadoes per square mile. So the most common type we see are relatively weak, very short-lived, and they typically occur between March and May. However, they can occur almost any time, and we've seen them here even in the winter time. And from my personal experience, we've been here 8 years, and every year our phone alerts us of tornado warnings. Now, knock on wood, thankfully there haven't been any that have touched down right here locally. We've had some scares, but just east of us around the Orangeburg area, there have been multiple that have actually touched down the area since we've been here. We've gone out with my real estate office and volunteered to help out in recovery. And I can tell you we saw a lot of mobile homes knocked off their access. Damages to stick-built houses were relatively minor unless trees fell on them, but they still existed. The roads, though, were always littered with trees, so don't try and drive when these storms hit. I know I've heard stories of trees falling on cars. In one of the recent one, it hit an Amazon truck, so don't go driving out in them. But I know that I've had clients that every time these alerts go out, they freak out and message me like, what do we need to do? So I know it's something that scares a lot of people. Now let's talk hurricanes, because obviously that's another big scare people have about the area. So according to dnr.sc.gov, from the facts part first and then my personal experience, from 1851 to 2021, 44 tropical cyclones have made landfall along the South Carolina coastline. Again, we're talking statewide. Of these 44 systems that have directly hit our coast, only 4 have made landfall as Category 3 plus hurricanes. The 1893 Sea Island hurricane, Hurricane Hazel, Hurricane Gracie, and Hurricane Hugo, the most recent. There are no Category 5 hurricane landfalls on record for the state of South Carolina. This is another thing we get alerts for every year, but historically, since we've been here, by the time they get to us, they've been downgraded to tropical storm. And honestly, there's been a lot of like random thunderstorms that roll through that were much worse than some of the tropical storms that came through. Now look, don't get me wrong, there's always that chance. I know a lot of local people still talk about Hurricane Hugo, but at least for my personal opinion, with hurricanes you get a heads up. And honestly, it's one of the reasons, to be truthfully, the other side of it, we haven't moved close to the beach. The idea of it still does frighten me, even though you get the warning of it. Now what about snow? So you can leave your snow shovels back home. We've been here again 8 years, and I've seen snow flurries just about every year, but it's only stuck once here in the Midlands. We got about an inch or so of snow, I'd say, and by the next afternoon it was gone. And because we're not prepared for snow, most schools and most jobs will truly have snow days and shut down. I've had clients from up north come down, they're like, what do you mean you guys are closing tomorrow? And they're like, well, there's a chance of snow. And they're like, that's just how we are. We're just not prepared for it. So they shut down everything. Trust me, you will be surprised. People online get mad how many times the school is shut down for storms, for random snow, maybes, all these types of things. Trust me, it's for liability reasons. Don't get mad about it. It's better this way than the alternative of what, essentially, let me give you a backstory. One year what happened is they weren't prepared for it and all the buses got stuck. And here's this snow and ice and the buses can't get the kids home. So it's a liability thing. But either way, statistically, they say we get less than an inch of snow per year. So again, leave your snow shovels back home if you're coming from the north. Now, rain. This is one thing that'll tell you is a lot. The first year we moved here was the year of the 2015 flood. You can go look it up. It literally poured rain as hard as you could imagine for 3 days straight. Like my windshield wipers could not, I was working EMS at the time, my windshield wipers could not keep up with the rain, and it was like that for 3 days straight. Now, that was what they call a 1,000-year storm. But outside of that, it does rain a significant amount. Same thing that same year when we first moved here, this was before the flood, is we had a period where we didn't see the sun for about 14 days. And they said it's the longest it had gone in some time for that without sun. And we were like, did we move to like Seattle or what is this? Like, it's just a lot of rain compared to where we came from. Now, granted, some days are just a thunderstorm that rolls through, but other times it seems like the rain just doesn't want to end. And they say statistically, we receive about 46 inches average rain, which the national average is 38, so we're above that. Now, before we dive into these next ones, as someone who personally relocated here back in 2015 from California, I know how challenging this is to try and go at it alone. You're literally looking at homes online, watching videos, looking on Google Maps, and trying to find that best home and truly area for your family. Well, my team and I have literally been helping people from all over the country, so feel free to give us a call or shoot us a message on our website. That way you don't have to go at it alone. Either way, there's a lot of diversity when it comes to the lay of the land here. I've told people before, no matter what you're looking for, you could probably find it. I mean, we have areas with homes built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, as well as those suburbs with new construction developments just about on every corner. We have homes with character and cookie cutter neighborhoods where you may not know which house is yours. We have lake homes, homes on rivers, homes on farms, $1 million homes, and $100,000 homes, as well as everything in between. And one thing that seems to take people by surprise and turn some people off is it gets rural really fast. That's right. One minute you're driving and you pass a Walmart, a Dunkin' Donuts, a restaurant, and the next crossroad, all you see are 2-lane roads with dirt roads running off either side of them. You'll see some trailer parks, and the only shopping in sight is Dollar General. I often have clients that will find houses online that seem to be a great deal, and only 15 to 20 minutes from downtown. But quickly they realize the house is practically in the middle of nowhere. They're surrounded by not a whole lot. Trees, maybe mobile homes, maybe some farmland, a trailer park, and around them, the nearest shopping is either that gas station or that Dollar General. They quickly tell me, I think we can cross this area off the list. Now, of course, with that said, those new homes typically don't run off of the dirt roads. They're typically paved roads going to those new construction homes. I just chose this location because aesthetically it matched the topic we're talking about. But with that said, this dirt road I stand on, we are right around the corner from a brand new construction neighborhood in about 2 minutes from a Chick-fil-A and a Publix. So that's why I say it gets rural fast. Now you may ask, where are those rural areas? So let me break down the area to you so you can kind of know where it gets rural. And as we talked about with weather, you could see some flood warnings in the area as I made this. But so either way, this is kind of our general area that we cover. And looking at it here, this is kind of downtown Lexington here. So basically heading to the west, basically this section right here where you see Summit, Gilbert, Murray, this is pretty rural here once you kind of cross this line here. So you have a lot in downtown Lexington that kind of picks up a little bit downtown Batesburg, Leesville, but then is rural pretty much around that that. Heading south as you head past Red Bank. Once you pass Red Bank out here, Gaston, Edmond, even going down to Pillion, Swansea, all those is very rural that way. On the north side, kind of once you pass Chapin up here, heading out towards Little Mountain, Prosperity, that's pretty rural out that direction. Heading up this way on the east side, Blythewood is kind of the tail end of it. Once you pass Blythewood, gets pretty rural that way. Heading out this way, you got a little bit in Elgin, then it picks back up in Lugoff. You got a downtown there as well as Camden, but pretty much all around it is going to be relatively rural up there. Heading to the south down this direction, pretty much once you leave the downtown area down here, heading out towards like Hopkins, Eastover, all that is very rural down this direction. So hopefully that gives you a better perspective of the quote unquote rural areas. And I've talked about this in other videos. There's multiple different types of rural. Don't get this twisted. I always break it down into 3 different categories. You have rural that some people think of, which is like trailer parks everywhere, right? And then you have rural that's like, to me, feels like a mountain town, like 2-lane roads, trees everywhere. And then you have rural that's like farmland. We got a mix of all of it. So it's not like rural, like some people really like the rural areas of certain things just because it's like trees and there's not like stores on every single corner. So again, a little bit of a mix of the different types of rural that you'll find. And again, they're all just kind of different. Look, this is a smaller town in the South. It's a slower pace of life. Things just don't happen as fast as they do in the big cities. I've had a lot of clients come from big cities, New York, Miami, LA, me personally coming from the outskirts of LA, and they let me know whether it was things like getting their car repair done or getting work done on the house. Things just took a whole lot longer than they expected. I mean, you'll find some business are closed on Sundays as well as Mondays. The workers they had working on their house would just take like random days off. Workers may show up for half days here and there. It just didn't make sense to them why these people weren't eager and like jumping at these jobs. And I get it. California were literally people lined up for labor jobs. You could get so many people coming over. Where here you may call 3, 1 doesn't show up, another shows up on the wrong day, and the third one is great, but they tell you that they're busy and they're booked out for the next 6 months. Unfortunately, it's just the reality of being in a smaller area. Now, I will say personally, it's gotten a lot better over the years, but it's still definitely different from these big cities. I mean, I know our patio here that I'm sitting on, it took way longer than I ever could imagine it would have taken when we lived in California. And now, don't get me wrong, it turned out phenomenal. The labor was great, but it just took a lot longer than we expected being from a busy area like we once were in. Now, this goes beyond just like work on houses and labor. I've talked about this in other videos. We have friends visit and we'll be driving and you come to a stop sign, and those from like New York and LA and Miami know like normally it's a rush to see who can go first. Well, here you often see people, no, you go, no, you go, no, you go. Like people just aren't in a hurry. In the grocery store, I talk about this a lot too. You may be in a hurry and you're looking at your watch like, I gotta go. And all of a sudden the person in front of you wants to have like this 20-minute conversation with the cashier about their kids and their dog, and you're like, I gotta get out of here, people. Like I should have just gone to the self-checkout, right? Like people just aren't in this big rush hurry like you see in these big cities. It's this slower pace of life, and I've had a lot of people that were like, Brandon, this is just not for me. Like the hustle and bustle is the way of my life, and I just can't deal with this slower pace. We're getting down to the big ones. One of the most common questions I get is, where are the neighborhoods that are walkable to downtown? I want a neighborhood where my family can go on a walk or a bike ride to a local ice cream shop, maybe a bike ride to dinner. Where do those neighborhoods exist? Well, to be 100% honest, I sit in one of the very few that we have right here in the Midlands of South Carolina. That's right, I'm sitting in the downtown of Lake Carolina. It is one of the neighborhoods that you can find exactly this. The homes sit all around me, and you can walk to this downtown. They have a pizza place, they have a coffee shop, ice cream shops, wine bars, and so much more, and even a convenience store right over here. And I've done a ton of videos about this neighborhoods if you want to learn about it, but outside of that, it's kind of hard to find something like this, if not nearly impossible, specifically right here in the Midlands. Sure, there's a couple neighborhoods that are connected to elementary schools, middle schools, but outside of that, most neighborhoods do not have sidewalks when you leave the neighborhood heading towards the downtown. They're often 2-lane roads with a narrow grassy easement that you'll question your life if you ever try and traverse it, or if your car breaks down on the side of the road, just being 100% honest. Now again, in other videos you may have seen, there are areas near downtown Columbia, near downtown Lexington, where there's some scattered houses around that you would be able to walk to the downtown. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of times y'all are looking for those neighborhoods with amenities. And those are the ones that are hard to find connected to the downtowns. And what I see often, the perspective I get is people want to essentially take their current living situation, the amenities nearby, the amenities in the neighborhood, even the size of the lot, we'll get into that in a little bit here, but they want to pick it up and place it right here in the Midlands of South Carolina with the hopes of a price point obviously less than what their current values of their home are, simply because of the information I share about our average price point. And again, I'll dive into this more a little bit later, but that's just not reality. A lot of the reason that our prices are the way they are is because we're a much smaller suburb than a lot of the places you're coming from. Our cities, our downtowns are much smaller than the areas you're most likely coming from. We're not a Charlotte, we're not a Charleston, we're not in Orlando, Nashville, New York, California, or more. And so a lot of those conveniences just don't exist yet. So you have to realize you're probably not gonna have all the things that you have in your current hometown, especially if you're coming from a major city, town, or suburb. And look, I get it. I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles. I literally walked or rode my bike to school from elementary school all the way through high school, just about every day that the weather suited it. We could walk to the neighborhood Thrifties and get ice cream, and I remember the day our mall expanded and the long-rumored Apple store came to town. Now I hear they even have a cheesecake factory at our local mall back home, but we're not there anymore. And their average price back in Cali is now nearly $800,000 in that area. So I'll take the trade-offs. Now, the big thing I tell a lot of people is I think this trend may become more popular in the future. You can go down to areas like Charleston and they already have neighborhoods like this, the popular Nextons. And if you watch any of my other videos, you know that their growth rate was much above ours. Historically, these walkable neighborhoods weren't as popular to the locals. As we become this hotspot for relocation, many developers are realizing that buyers want this. They crave it. They want the amenities. They want the conveniences. So I believe we'll start to see more opportunities like this down the line. I've already seen some of the developers adding amenities that we didn't have in years. I mean, one neighborhood even announced they're gonna have pickleball courts in the neighborhood. I know this is hot trend in many other places, especially Florida, I hear from you guys, but we're just jumping onto that bandwagon. And I guess I shouldn't say we're, as I don't play, but you know what I mean. We are still in the early phases of our growth. I mean, there are still vacant lots on downtown Lexington's Main Street. Sorry, people on Facebook pages that try to fight the growth, but it's still happening. And the developers are still learning from the dynamics of what these buyers truly want. Again, we saw Charleston adapt to the new trends and styles, and I believe that Lexington, Columbia, and the surrounding areas will start to catch on as well. Well, you'll start to see more neighborhoods like the Lake Carolinas where you have those conveniences within walking distance. There's already been one proposed in downtown Lexington, Sandpiper Square, that would be walkable to downtown Lexington. So again, the days are coming, we're just not there yet. Lexington, Irmo, Northeast Columbia, these are no longer just small little downtowns. They're growing suburbs, and they're starting to feel the pains of that. Again, some of these things may contradict themselves in your thoughts. So on one accord, Brandon, you're saying it's a busy area, another chord you're saying it's not that big of an area. As I've mentioned, these are the reasons that people have shared with me of why they decided the area wasn't for them. And of course, they're coming from so many different areas around the country, and their perspectives are different. And so that's why I'm trying to give you these different perspectives so you can make that better understanding depending on where you're coming from. And in the end of the day, you know, your downtown Lexingtons, Blythewood, Irmos, Chapins, and all these areas have a very small town feel, but they're not a small town. What do I mean by that? This isn't your one traffic stoplight town where everybody knows each other's names. I mean, sorry, Lexington, those days are gone. It's officially a growing suburb, but again, it has that quaint downtown feel. Right here in Lexington, as well as in Blythewood, Chapin, and others, you have amphitheaters where they do concerts, farmers markets, and so much more. You have the downtown strip with your local shops, restaurants, and so many things. So you get that feel, but the size is definitely growing. Let me give you an idea so you can compare to maybe from where you're coming from. And I'm gonna pull the Lexington area just because it's the easiest to explain, because you have town of Lexington, then you have greater Lexington, then you have county of Lexington. But let's cover the town. So the town itself, at the 2020 census, to give you an idea of size first, 12.12 square miles. population of 23,568. Now the greater Lexington area, like I said, not the entire county, because that's about double of what I'm about to read, but the zip codes that encompass Lexington came out at 111,549 at that census. So again, not a large area because, right, compared to the sizes of the Charlottes, Charleston, Greenville, as well as their suburbs, we just don't compare to that, even downtown Columbia. But the pains of a growing suburb exist. Traffic for a lot of people is getting worse. I mean, I've talked about before where the county, the state, and the local areas have been doing things, changing roads to try and make them better, widening the interstates, but they're just having a hard time keeping up with the infrastructure and the growth. And for a lot of people, they just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Citizens raise their hands, fighting arguments, wanting to stop the growth. I mean, you may have seen this on local Facebook groups or had one of the angry ones tell you, we're full, you need to go back home. But I hate to tell them, a lot of you are still coming. They get mad at me in the comments sometimes and think I'm the one to blame. But again, there's so many great things about this place that are attracting it to it and why the state has become one of the top 3 relocation destinations. It just didn't have to get on people's radar till after the pandemic. So now a lot of the towns and counties are trying to play catch up. So what gives? Well, again, I'm glad the talks have started and they're trying to do things, but for a lot of people, unfortunately, and I've seen complaints all over the place, they don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. There's been things like restricting storage units and where they can build and adding roundabouts everywhere. But in the meantime, again, for a lot of people, they feel like it's too big of an area. It's not the small town they thought it was. And again, because once again, I wouldn't call it a small town. I call it a growing suburb that's still in the early phases of its growth. Cost of living. That's right, I told you this last one would surprise you because a lot of you have told me, and you may be considering South Carolina because you heard that home prices are well below the national average, and that is absolutely still true to this day. But I realized real quick, it creates the wrong perspective. Now don't get me wrong, me coming from California and some of my clients moving from Hawaii, New York, Florida, and other states still think they're practically giving these homes away. They're surprised at how far their money goes. But plenty of others show up and are surprised that their money just doesn't go as far as they thought it would. And you may have seen this on some of the comments on my videos. I post some videos of home tours, neighborhood tours, and you'll see comments of people saying that home is so overpriced, yet that home sells in a day. So clearly it was not. And I often hear people telling me that they're just not seeing many homes on the market in the areas that they're looking or the homes that they're looking for. And I'll often look and I'll often tell them, you know, there are homes, they're just a lot higher in price than where you're looking at. And as well, one of the biggest complaints I get, these homes in these new neighborhoods are just stacked right on top of each other. I can't stand it. I want the homes with land, more space. And to be 100% honest, they exist. Problem is they often cost a lot more than people were hoping. There are plenty of neighborhoods with half-acre lots or more, and even some new construction ones, right? Arborette Longview, Ashley Oaks, Lakeside at Wood Creek, and their prices come in the high 500s and 600s. Even Ascot, about a year ago, had some nice homes brand new on 1-acre lots, and they came in the high 700s. And you'll often see custom homes that are built on random lots from around the 500s to over $1 million. But oftentimes, people's budget just doesn't reflect the price of those homes. So it's not that the builders don't build them and that they don't exist, it's just that your money just might not go as far as you thought it would. And the builders are just trying to build mostly homes within the budget that most people are buying. Might be the budget that you're looking at. And to keep those prices, they just happen to be those ones with the smaller lots. Again, our average price is lower than the national average, but don't forget, that's for the average home. And what I've realized for a lot of people, it's not that they're priced wrong, it's just simply your perspective of what that home should cost is different than you were expecting. And so that's why I say, cost of living is one of the big reasons people say no to South Carolina, because their perception doesn't always meet the reality of what it costs here. Look, just to be real, the days of phenomenal homes on Lake Murray being only $700,000 are gone. From what I've seen and showing, those houses are now well over $1 million, if not $2 million. And the days of finding a turnkey starter up for $150,000 are just about gone as well. Now, I'm not saying I'm above this. Yes, someone commented that once on my channel. I've sold plenty of homes under $150,000 in my career. I just haven't seen or shown one that anyone thought was livable or in an area they even desire to live. live in a very long time. Look, I get it. I moved here in 2015 and bought my first house for $149,000. You heard that right. But since then, a lot of y'all followed me here and prices have risen. You cannot get that same home literally for under $200,000 anymore. Shoot, nowadays you can't get it for under $250,000 anymore. It's just the truth of it. And while many have hoped and prayed for a market crash, it just hasn't happened. And it doesn't seem to be a light at the end of tunnel. There's still a ton of people like you relocating here every single day. And inventory just cannot keep up. Yes, builders are building on every corner, but they're also selling those homes on every single corner. Hence the reason they keep building them. I wish I could tell you we've reached the ceiling, but look, I said I came from California, and I know we're far from the ceiling when it comes to home pricing. As people migrate around the country, prices rise, and South Carolina has been one of the top 3 states people are relocating to our area, and prices continue to rise. Not to mention, the state has started attracting a lot of businesses to the area, which means more jobs and more people relocating. And let me tell you what we saw in California, and this is no joke. I'm talking about homes back in the 80s that sold for around the 200,000 mark, now are close to $1 million. Like, that's just the reality of what happens when people migrate across the country, because as you know, that's what happened with California. A ton of people and a ton of businesses went to the California, especially we were in Southern California, but Northern California saw it even more so. You go to Silicon Valley and your basic starter home comes in at over $1 million. That's right. And a lot of people say, well, this isn't California. Sure, and you may be correct, but back in the 80s when all of this started, California wasn't the California it is now. It was a completely different area. And so it was just over time, people started migrating to the area, and that just naturally drives up pricing when supply can't keep up with the demand of people relocating. And before you start getting all up on me, like, I'm not projecting that's where we're gonna go. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to give you a perspective when we talk about pricing of what I've seen in my lifetime and what I've seen started to happen here. And the bonus, the one, I haven't had anyone say I'm not moving here because of this, but it still takes people by surprise. Like, this fills a lot of Facebook comments about people relocating to the area. And that's vehicle property taxes. Yes, we pay vehicle property taxes every single year. And this is gonna include your vehicles, your RVs, your boats. Again, this was not new to me because coming from California, we paid excessive DMV fees. So it was a wash for us as well. I've had people argue about me about this, but it looks like about half the states across the country do pay it. So for some of you, this is normal. I get a lot of questions about it though, right? Is it based off of Kelley Blue Book value? And that answer is no, and I can say that because I recently traded in my truck. I had a Tacoma, and I'll get into dollar amounts to help you understand this a little bit better. But I traded in, and Kelley Blue Book at the time when I traded in, trade-in value was about $26,000, somewhere around there, and the county was assessing it about $20,000. So again, it's not KBB. They have their own depreciation calculator. Two, a lot of people bring up, well, I hear it's about 6%. Well, that's assessed value. It's kind of similar with houses. There's assessed value, and then there's actual tax amount. Again, these are politicians. These are not math majors. I wish I could tell you the math to it. It's not that simple. But to give you an idea, so again, my Tacoma, my last tax bill, assessed around $20,000. My actual tax bill I paid to the county was about $550, somewhere around there, give or take, you know, a couple bucks there. So hopefully that gives you a better idea on a $20,000 assessed value. That's what you're paying. Again, I don't know the depreciation numbers. We've never personally owned very expensive cars. Now, granted, like I said, traded in my Tacoma. I feel like every vehicle is expensive now, but besides the point, yes, we pay vehicle property taxes every single year. Hopefully that gives you a better idea. They do have calculators online, but of course they're gonna ask you the value. So if it's brand new, you can figure it out. If it's a resale, I don't know, try KBB and just say, hopefully it'll be less than that.
All right, so after watching that, if you've realized you could survive all those things, you'll want to check out this playlist here, because this is where I truly break down all the areas in the Midlands of South Carolina. From Lexington to Irmo to Chapin to Blythewood, Northeast Columbia, Elgin, and so many more, so you could figure out which area best suits you and your family needs. So check out that playlist.